Thank you, Phyllis, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for making time to attend this. So, what do we call these events? Is it a masterclass? Is it a teaching event? Is it a presentation? So hopefully you'll be able
So this is
to.
a user group.
A user group.
AWS user group, yes.
Perfect. Yeah. So hopefully you'll be able to, when you leave this meeting, you'll be able to have a lot more knowledge than you joined. So just a few slides I'm going to take you through about me. My name is Arthur, and I am a lead solutions architect in AWS, Azure, GCP, and then overall IT architect. In a nutshell, God first, family, technology, and photography. That's about me. And this is just a brief summary of my most relevant professional history. I've held roles from mid-level systems engineer all up to solution owner in SAP and cloud and Azure. And I think my most enriching tenure was with my time at Deloitte, where I managed to move through various roles and also do a lot of consulting on cloud and SAP products. So for me, I live by this statement right here: results don't lie. And as solutions architects, as engineers, you all are aware that you can make a picture look as pretty as it can be, or as pretty as the new Barbie movie that came out, but the results speak for themselves, right? And you should always be wary to make sure that whatever you put through on your conceptual feature state designs is exactly what you're going to deliver to the client. So one of my personal achievements that I'm very most proud of is my weight loss journey. You might be wondering why I'm wearing a suit at 7 p.m. in the evening, but when you see these photos, you realize I didn't have a neckline before, so I kind of enjoy looking very nice and neat as always. During my tenure at Deloitte, I was an exceptional performer, which is one of the highest performance rating that you can get in the consulting space at Deloitte. And this was one of the experts from my manager that I reported to directly, listing all the projects that I worked on. And also one of many achievements that I'm proud of is I was chosen in 2019 out of the whole Deloitte EMEA practice to go and represent and assist Deloitte Belgium with the infrastructure as cloud project in 2019. So I was based in Belgium for about 2 weeks and then continued to work with the team remotely for about a year. And we delivered that, which was my first infrastructure as code project, by the way, working with Python and JavaScript. And we managed to deliver that successfully and retailing to clients all over. I've worked in multiple industries, mining industry, manufacturing, financial services, and this was me at one of our clients where we did an underground mining assessment where we were introducing some telemetry underground. So we're looking at putting some IoT data probes 2.9 kilometers underground. I blacked out obviously some of the faces there because I obviously didn't have authority to use these pictures. You'll see Mulalo here. I think is one of the persons that I spoke to recently, and he gave me the right to use his photo in here. And one of also my biggest, proudest achievement was I was very influential in building this team. I reported to the gentleman at the bottom right-hand corner there, the CMS Africa practice leader. And at the time that I left Deloitte, I was a CMS delivery lead, and I was responsible for hiring and interviewing and hiring and building out the team. By the time I ended up managing a lot of those people. And my passion is teaching. And a lot of my team members here started off as interns with little to no knowledge of cloud. And some of them, like Mulalo now, is solutions architect certified. He's DevOps professional certified. He's rocking it on Terraform and everything else. So it's always a proud moment. And just my journey, but yeah, you don't really want to see that. But anyway, getting to how we build an SD-WAN using AWS. So software-defined WAN, which is a wide area network, just as the brief that Phyllis explained. So wide area networks have been used for many years. So connecting multiple branches of companies across the country, across continents, across globes, actually. And the predecessor to SD-WAN was MPLS. If any of you know networking, MPLS systems and now have become a thing of the past over the past few years, and they have been replaced with SD-WAN technologies, which the leading giants like Cisco and Palo Alto actually provide those SD-WAN technologies. But since with the move to the cloud, a lot of these networking giants like Palo Alto and Cisco have gone on to have their services available on cloud, on AWS and Azure. So you can actually incorporate, if you already have an existing network of Cisco appliances or Palo Alto appliances, you can actually incorporate that into your new future state SD-WAN design on AWS, leveraging the bring your own license options that are available, so that you can build that cloud environment as an extension of your on-premise environment and incorporate your licenses, which will help you save a lot more in the future. So I'm just going to take you through the next few slides, like some of the important considerations of SD-WAN, what you should be looking out for, and also what the expected outcomes are and what you can achieve with SD-WAN, and the great benefits of going the cloud software-defined route, as well as going through the legacy hardware appliance issue. So moving on to just an overview of SD-WAN, as I explained. So software-defined wide area networks. So think of an organization that operates across multiple regions in Africa, and also multiple continents in the US or Australia. So this particular use case that I'm going to share was one of my clients that actually is headquartered in South Africa, but they've got operations in Australia, in South America, and in Ghana, and also in the UK. And what we decided to achieve, or what we wanted to achieve with an SD-WAN solution in the cloud, was to replace their legacy solution that was running on a mix of hardwares that some were outdated, some were complicated to maintain, because it's either the support stuff is such a niche that is too expensive, and you rely on a very limited number of resources, which cause a future to your business operations in any case. So the benefits of a global SD-WAN in AWS, right? And I think the most important of all is flexibility and scalability, right? So you have to understand anything in the cloud. We look at the speed to innovation. So it'll take you a couple of minutes with proper planning, of course, because before we go and start clicking and spinning up everything in the cloud, there's always some immense planning and information gathering that goes on behind. You have to spend time with your client so that you can properly build a problem statement, understand where the pain points are for that client, and also then understand how to tailor make and custom make a solution for that particular client, right? And I think, Phyllis, maybe we can have that as another topic to discuss on, how to make an impact as a solutions architect. before one actually just starts to go and build. There's a process that we need to go through, take our clients through doing business cases and so on. But in any case, so optimized connectivity, right? The fact that you can make use of the AWS global network, the fact that AWS is available in most regions right now, with the recent launch of AWS in Nigeria, and you've got AWS in South Africa that has been up and running for a few years. So the African footprint is growing exponentially, which brings in great opportunity for us to be able to sell these solutions to our clients, right? So optimized connectivity, you can link up Europe and Africa now at ease, because once you are connected onto the AWS backbone, connectivity within those regions becomes a lot easier and a lot faster because you're connected into the backbone. So you also have flexibility and scalability, as I mentioned, with building everything on clouds. You always have to look at performance-based scalability, which you can build into your SD-WAN networks on some of the few services that I'm going to touch on in the next few slides. And also cost efficiency, right? You realize when you're doing the pricing exercise, when you do an ROI model comparison, so your return on investment. So when you're building that business case for a client, I think all of the chief financial officers would want to know, how much is this going to cost me, right? And you most times you do a side-by-side comparison and show them that, look, for you to replace your existing hardware and solution that is probably 5 to 10 years old, this is how much you need to fork out, which is always in the millions of rands and dollars, depending on the size of the organization. But cost efficiency in cloud, as we all know, that it's pay-per-use, right? So you are changing your business model to an OpEx-based model, operational expenditure, instead of CapEx, where you need a huge lump sum of CapEx at the beginning to actually download, or buy all the appliances that you need and so forth. So enhanced performances as well. So introducing services like your direct connects. You also have transit gateways, VPC peering, which all happen within AWS, right? And you can share them depending on how you design that network. But looking at a global SD-WAN solution, there will be some services that will be sitting in a shared services hub, right? If you design looking at a hub and spoke design, so your shared services hub, which would most likely sit on top of your DMZ, which would be your breakout point. So in doing that as well, you're segregating your production systems, making sure that security and compliance are also part of the build. And you also need to comply to the data residency and data and transit laws of whichever region that you'll be building incorporating in. So in South Africa, we also, we've got the POPI Act, right? In the UK, we've got the GDPR that we have to look at and consider in all our builds. But thankfully enough, AWS covers all of those, and also ISO certified, etc. All right. Everybody still with me? Any questions so far? Or do you want to wait until the end? We're still good?
I think you can proceed. Those with questions can pop them in the chat. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So moving on to key considerations, right? As mentioned earlier, that your first step would be to make sure that you build Apologies for that. Sorry, just give me a second. Okay, so your network architecture. That's your first step. So before you go about and start attempt building, you have to understand the lay of the land. So as I mentioned at the very beginning, is you spend the time with your client, you understand their network topology, where do they reside, also probably do some network assessment tests to understand where the heavy network users sit, right? So that you can also consider what products to use. Maybe you might need an AWS CloudFront appliance at the edge of that region if there's a lot of web application services that are being utilized in that specific region. So understanding your network topology and building that network architecture, right? Design is a resilient and reliable network architecture for your global connectivity. That is very important. And secondly, the cardinal rule in solutions design is always designed with security in mind, right? Everything we do with layers of security, and also looking at the first consideration is always to have a zero least privileged access policy that you can always amend as when as the users require that those specific roles. And then looking at performance, ensuring high performance and low latency connectivity between locations. So this is where you need to get to understand how the AWS transit gateways work and where to input your direct connect to make sure that you've got seamless connection between your on-premise hybrid solution into cloud, which makes sure that your connection is always high performance and has low latency. And again, compliance, meeting the regional compliance requirements for your data regulations, depending on where you build. So it all goes back to the network architecture, understanding where your client operates and the nature of your client's business will help you answer a lot of these questions. All right. And also building with redundancy, you always have to make sure that you're not creating a single point of failure in your solution design. So in most cases, you might want to look at having, if you do have a direct connect, in most cases, maybe you might want to look at having an AWS private link, depending on the customer's nature of business, right? You have to also understand their RTO and RPO time, so restore time objectives and restore point objectives, so which will give you guidance of what to include in the redundancy. And obviously, if their restore time objective is very high, if it's a bank, then obviously cost will not be an issue, because they need to make sure that their systems are available 99.9% of the time. And lastly, we're looking at monitoring and management, right? There's the importance of having monitoring tools that are centralized, that you can manage and look at from one central location. So the beauty with AWS, right? There is the network management console that you can actually plug in, pull in custom-made monitoring tools like your Datadog or I think we all have different flavors there, but also monitoring those logs with your AWS advisor, so that you can also have a look, keep an eye of what's happening in the network and what needs to be fixed and the errors there. So just going through a few of the key services to incorporate into your SD-WAN design. So I think we've spoken about the AWS Direct Connect, which provides a dedicated private connection between your on-premise data centers and your AWS your AWS tenant and your AWS region. So when you're connecting to that tenant, you can then link the various VPCs that you want to connect into. And as you can see on this diagram, some of the redundant connections that you can also introduce in there is having an AWS site-to-site VPN to work with your AWS Direct Connect in the event that one of those connections drops and you actually still have access to your production environment and the client can still work and carry on peacefully. And also one of my favorite additions to AWS, I think this was introduced a few years ago, probably around 2020, 2021, if I'm not mistaken, or to the South African region, that is. But this is your AWS Transit Gateway. So what I love about the Transit Gateway is that it simplifies just your network connection between multiple VPCs within, and that can run across multiple accounts within AWS, right? So if you have probably an AWS control tower that's running a couple of organizations there, you can quite literally set up a single breakout point for your network, or a management layer from the organization point of view, so that all your accounts would connect through that, which is easier to manage from a security point of view, but also easy to distribute policies from a transit gateway perspective, because you can manage this from a central point location. And also you can still segment the different cross-region connectivity. Being an SD-WAN design, you want to dictate that all the traffic that will be moving between regions doesn't have to go through the internet, right? So it actually traverses through that particular transit gateway, which makes your data transfers, your connectivity a lot faster and a lot more secure as well. And also the core network edge, the CNE, which is managed and controlled by AWS globally. As I mentioned at the very beginning, that once you are connected into that direct connect or the transit gateway, then you are plugged into the core backbone of the AWS network. So for your connectivity and data transfers, that works a lot smooth and a lot easier for you as well. And this, I just summarized some of the key services that you can potentially use. So again, it's very key to understand your customers' needs, right? And clearly define that problem statement, what you want to achieve. Then you get to understand that you don't have to use all the services, all the network services that are there. At some point, you may realize that you probably don't need a global accelerator if you are connecting between regions that already have great internet connectivity and communication. If your client already doesn't have any firewalls on premise, then you can go and look at the AWS network firewall, right? But in most cases, you either be building out the cloud environment as an extension of already existing environment. So there's always a great need to understand how other technologies work, like Cisco, Palo Alto. Then they'll just plug into that SD-WAN global design that you're building up. So I think some of these features are pretty straightforward, like your AWS site-to-site VPN, which is it's a cheaper alternative, I guess, to a direct connect. But I think for production services, for production VPCs, it's always recommended, highly recommended, that the client goes for a direct connect, as it gives you a better uptime on SLA and availability. Amazon VPC peering. This one is quite also straightforward, that you can introduce peering between VPCs, whether they are in the same AWS account or across multiple accounts, depending on how you build out that architecture in your global transit network, which is the transit gateway. I think I spoke on that a little bit earlier, and also the AWS Private Link, which is one of the latest offerings from AWS, right? This gives you a completely dedicated link that you can access any of your production environments on AWS. And you don't have to go through a public internet connection to be able to reach that. So it's always key to keep in mind. You hear me repeating this very often because it's very important to keep it at the back of your mind. Understand your client's needs, right? And also remember, with a lot of these services can get the job done, but are you picking the right service for your customer? And also looking at the cost implications, right? I mean, for those of you who have taken the solutions architect exam, the associate or the professional, you get questions like this, right? Where there is a possibility that 3 out of the 4 answers are correct, but you need to understand what is the right answer based on cost, based on the client's needs, and also based on the business future state. So if the business, what their cloud policy is it cloud first? Are they looking at digitizing or doing a digital transformation for all their business units in the future? So all of those are quite important to get to know, to get to understand before you start building out and picking what services to use. So here, just going through, giving you a bit of a view of what some of the most popular use cases would look like. All right. So as you can see on your screen here, so this is a client that has hybrid connections, and hybrid, we know that they've got some data centers on premise and connectivity into AWS, and there's some VPCs that are running across multiple regions. So you've got about 3 regions presented into this picture, and as you can see, for each branch that is represented here, there is an SD-WAN connectivity from that particular data center in that region connecting into the corresponding AWS region. And you also have a VPN gateway from the branch there. So that VPN gateway, this will be your site-to-site VPN. And then you also have your client VPN for remote users. So users that actually want to access the services running in AWS without going through the client network, they can connect directly onto the client VPN, and they've got access to whatever desktop services or local services that are running in the VPN. So you've got a transit gateway over here. Let me just see if I can bring up my annotation here. So you've got a transit gateway. You've got a transit gateway on region number 1, right? And the DX is the exchange, depending on who is your network provider in that region. So that's the exchange that then translate the connection from AWS into data center. So for South Africa, we have Terraco, right? Terraco runs as an exchange provider for AWS, Azure, and GCP. So for most of the cloud, cloud providers, and you also have Liquid Telecoms in the mix. Somewhere there are also some of the DX partners, providers, exchange partners. So that transit gateway then translates your connection into your selected data center, right? And then you now have another WAN connection, which then branches out into the different branches. So that WAN connection is connected by, that will be your existing solution that connects your client's on-premise needs. So most likely an MPLS solution. So as you can see that the SD-WAN here acted as an extension to plug in all the other existing solutions that are existing on-premise that the client already uses, and then plug that into the AWS network. And then from there, you can now start to build your VPCs on top of that layer, depending on what you want to bring out. So the first region has got 3 VPCs, probably a production, a dev, and a QA VPC, right? And possibly there might be some further segmentation in there by access control, whether you can use knuckles in there, or you're going to use your security groups to make sure that either production and dev do not talk to each other, and vice versa. So looking also at region number 2, so similar setup. You've got an SD-WAN connecting into one of the branches, and the second branch also has a VPN side-to-side connection. And region 3, also a very similar setup, but slightly a little bit more complicated, as there's an on-premise SD-WAN already. But if you can see, the common denominator there is the transit gateway that then plugs you directly into the AWS core network for stronger connectivity, faster data transfers between regions, etc. Use case number 2. So very, very similar to the first use case that we've just seen. It's that I think that the major difference here is that there's a bit of network segmentation within AWS, so that you can also achieve that through your VPC peerings, or through your transit gateway policies that you can set up on the management console. And I think we'll look at a screenshot of that. And these are just some of the network policies clearly outlined per region. So you've got your core network policy that surrounding the entire AWS tenant, right? So whether you're controlling that, from one AWS account and deploying into multiple regions, you can still set up that network policy at the very top of your hierarchy, so that it applies going downwards. So if you look at the left-hand side here, you've got your network configuration, regions, autonomous systems, which is your ACN numbers, and this is where BGP comes into play as well, because you're connecting through multiple regions, right? Each region has a specific unique BGP that identifies where that traffic is coming from, and understands how to route it, whether AWS will know that this traffic is coming from South Africa, or from Ghana, or from each any other network in the region. Yes?
Sorry, Arthur. While you are on that, you just mentioned an abbreviation there, which got my antennas going up. BGP. Maybe if you can drill a bit into it, and what exactly is it in layman terms for some of us here, because we just see questions on BGP and we go blonde.
All right, okay. So I'll touch it here at a very high level, because look, networking on its own, it's a subject on its own that requires at least an hour of deep dive. But BGP simply means that so it's a function or a means of in which that all the junction points within the internet, so all the routers communicate with each other through that specific if they're correctly weighted through the region of location where they're coming from. So as I mentioned, that each region will have its own specific BGP, so that it understands that this packet is coming from an African region or a South African region, etc., like that. But just from let me just open up one of the experts here. So just from an AWS point of view, right? I think so, because AWS, the core network is sort of set up as one entire network space, right? Although there is multiple regions. So you often use BGP when you are setting up a either a site-to-site VPN between your on-premise data center and AWS, or a direct connect, between your data center and AWS, because you need to allow the two internet service providers to communicate, right? Because we've got AWS is an ISN, right? And then depending on which ISP your company might be using, maybe they might be using BCX as an internet service provider, which use the telecom backbone, or they might be connected directly into Africa, into Terraco, which also uses a separate type of BGP. So it's just for your international routing between multiple junction points, for them to be able to identify each other and communicate, to understand that this is coming from a particular point within Africa, and this is coming from a particular point or service provider within another region. I hope that's an acceptable answer for now.
It is, thank you.
All right, perfect. So we're coming to an end of our presentation, and think we'll be able to set some time up for the question and answer session. But this is just to give you an overview of what the management and monitoring dashboards look like in AWS. So when you are working on the network manager, so you've got you can quite literally see, if you take a look at this picture on the left-hand side of the screen, it creates an entire map for you to show you which regions are active within that specific account, and gives you that as it can clearly draw up a map for you, a global map, to see what your SD-WAN connectivity looks like. And then you can click on the different subsets, subcategories. If you look at the Transit Gateway tab, you've got an edge tab as well, so that you can actually see how many Transit Gateway connections are in that specific region, and the details of that. And the event log just also gives you more detailed events of each and every connection, if there are any errors, if there are any alerts that you need to look out for. That's essentially what it is all about. And this is also just gives you a more detailed graphic view of the previous screen that we've just seen. Obviously, these views you can only achieve depending on what you have built in that particular account from a network point of view, so that you can have this nice looking spider diagram that shows you all the connectivity points between your regions, and all the particular components that you have set up, whether it's a VPC or VPC cluster, VPC peer. You'll be able to manage, to see, manage, and monitor that from a single point, which is the network manager in AWS. So we're just about to wrap up, and looking at your best practices, right? So before you go ahead and start building any solution, and for today we're focusing on an SD-WAN solution. Again, as I mentioned before, and I keep on repeating myself because this is very important, and this usually goes unmentioned, and you end up having a lot of runaway costs in the client environment. So firstly, start off with the proof of concept, right? A POC. So you have to identify probably a set of systems within the customer's environment that you can use as a test case, right? Build up a small controlled SD-WAN environment that you can actually test to make sure that the on-premise systems will be able to communicate with the cloud environment with that particular network connectivity that you would have set up at that point in time. And then always optimize for cloud native architecture. And excuse me. So I think we are still a long time away from realizing or actually building purely cloud architectures. In terms of where IT infrastructure is concerned, right? Because a lot of organizations, you've got applications that in most cases cannot be moved to cloud. If you take a look at manufacturing firms or mining firms, there's certain systems that they call operational technologies, right? And those need to be they need to remain on premise, because if there's a discrepancy of a couple of milliseconds in latency, it can throw off your entire telemetry on a mining environment or on a manufacturing plant, and that is not acceptable. So optimize for cloud native architecture, right? Embrace automation. Infrastructure as code is definitely something that we all need to start looking at, if we're already not looking into that now, because it helps you when when you need to change a deployment or do an upgrade in a huge environment. So it's always easier to just update a certain line of code in your script and then deploy that using your Visual Studio Code or whatever CI/CD tool that you'll be using at that point in time. Regular testing and updates. I think just from an operational standpoint, this is always a must, right? So just a best practice.
Sorry, Arthur.
Yeah.
Sorry, forgive me. We're left with 10 minutes. The people will kill me if they don't get a chance to ask you questions.
Questions.
We'll share the slides with them, and they can try make sense of the best practices. I'm going to open the floor now to some questions for you.
Yeah, sure. Let's go.
I'm going to start with the audience. If there's anyone with a question, you can just unmute and ask. Then I can ask the ones which came through during the course of the week, for which I have ready on hand. So if there's anyone from the audience who has a question, please unmute and ask.
Hi, thank you, Phyllis. Thank you, Arthur, for this amazing time. It was very great hearing from you and your expertise.
Mm.
I usually like to ask very dumb questions because I believe it's from those so say dumb questions that you actually get to the bottom of some very, very important things. I'm now thinking, you've been talking a lot about SD-WAN and everything and
Yeah.
how it works on AWS. And then I'm thinking AWS has specific design principles and basically would still believe that you have to be well architected on AWS. And looking at your best practices, you have talked about proof of concept, things like embracing automation and implementing security best practices. My question now would be, um, I have two questions actually. I'll just say them together so that I don't take other people's time. I would say my first question is on monitoring. And I know you mentioned that there's a way to use like third-party monitoring services like Datadog. Let's say maybe I use something like Honeycomb and things like that. You showed us a slide where you were showing us exactly what would get in monitoring. Is that like a service provided by AWS if I have a third-party monitoring software like Datadog or Honeycomb? That's number one. And if it's not provided or AWS is maybe generally going to want me to use X-Ray and CloudWatch, can I bring in a third party? I'm assuming as a client, I already had a working concept and I'm migrating it so that it works via SD-WAN. Can I bring in my third party monitoring service like Datadog and Honeycomb? And what is the cost implication for me as a client? That's number one. The second thing I would ask is, how do we like handle the trade-offs? Looking at your best practices, I don't know if they're in order of what to look at first, but I think most people would agree with me that cost will be important. But let's assume that I have an application or an infrastructure that I need to bring into this space that has to be at minimum cost, but the trade-off it also has to be very secure. How do I, looking at the well-architected framework, how do I balance that trade-off to try and keep it as secure as possible, also trying to keep it as minimum in cost as possible as well?
Yeah, no, thanks for that.
I hope that.
Yeah, no, thanks for your questions, Rejoice. So firstly, yes, you can bring in third-party monitoring tools to AWS, or you can actually monitor your AWS environment using third-party tools. I've worked with multiple clients that have that type of setup that's working for them. Because remember, as I mentioned before, that a lot of the times these are not greenfield setup, right? You're either optimizing an existing environment by digitizing some of the solutions and moving into cloud, or you're the business decided to introduce a cloud strategy for their business, right? And that cloud strategy might say anything new from today or from June 2023 going forward has to be deployed into the cloud, right? And then we'll start migrating whatever services that are on-premise gradually over the years into the cloud until we have probably like an 80-20 parity where you've got 80% of your production systems in the cloud and 20% of your systems on-premise, right? So keeping that in mind, it goes back to, so remember the best practices that I showed you here for an SD-WAN, right? But as I was putting this content together, it kept on coming to my mind that we actually need to have another masterclass or another teaching session about how to take you through the process before you even start building, in the cloud, because remember, it's never a case where as a cloud engineer, when you get a set of instructions to say, look, build this, go and build me an SD-WAN solution in the cloud. This is the design you must follow. Someone has gone through that entire process with the business, right? And that process is called a business case. So as part of your business case, you need to do what is called like a cloud maturity readiness assessment, right? Understand if that to what level is that business ready to move into the cloud, and you identify which applications are you going to move into the cloud. So remember, the well-architected framework is set there, and at most of the time you're not going to be able to hit 100% on a well-architected framework, but there are other certain pillars that are non-negotiable, like security, right? The cost is very relative, again, to what you want to build for your client. And as I mentioned before, you can't compare building a solution for a bank, right, and building a solution for a school, right? One exists in the financial services field where money is really not an issue for them, right? And the other one is a school that relies on either donor funding and tuition fees to be paid, et cetera, et cetera. So probably the school, the cost is very important to them, right? So the school will tell you, look, we want a solution, but please keep the cost as most affordable as possible. That's why you'll see when you take your, or even when you're practicing for your solutions architect exam, the questions, as the questions are asked, right, is like, pick the correct solution, but there's always a connotation there to say keep or choose a solution that is as low cost as possible, right? But in most cases, that may not be possible, because security is very costly, as we all understand, right? I mean, spinning up a network appliance in the cloud, I mean, you're looking at very minimum probably $980 or $950 a month. That's without adding a lot of your logs for streaming and monitoring there. So you may also notice that a bank may require to say that, guys, we were planning on introducing a CASB solution into our environment. So can we have a similar CASB solution in cloud, right? And already that's going to throw your cost effectiveness or your low cost options out of the window. So it all depends on what the client wants. And you have to understand that you cannot meet, you cannot get 100% on a well-architected framework on all the pillars, right? So it will depend on what the client specifically wants and what the needs for the clients are. So
thank you. Thank you, Arthur. I
Yeah.
think Rejoice is answered. We are actually on 8 o'clock. Sorry, guys, I need a favor from you all before you drop. For those who can quickly switch on their cameras, we need to just take a photo for the community. We are trying to get ourselves registered as a recognized user group. And these are some of the sessions which have high attendance, which we can use for justification. This can help us get funding for things like exam vouchers, your stickers for your laptops, your swag, etc. So for those who can switch on their cameras for me, please, so that we can just take a quick screenshot, please, before you guys drop off. Then we can, while these two guys are switching on your cameras, I'd like to say thank you so much to Arthur. I believe 1 hour was not enough for this learning session because I had a bunch of questions from different people asking what's the benefit of me having this skill as a solution architect, and how big a company are we looking at who would want to implement such a solution. So I guess we need to set up a follow-up session on some of those things. Maybe while people are switching on their cameras, you can answer that one question as to why would a solution architect require this knowledge of SD-WAN?
So guys, you have to understand that as a solutions architect, you have to be knowledgeable in all sections, right? Because you are like the coordinator, so you have to understand networking, you have to understand security, you have to understand infrastructure, you have to understand cost implications for the business. At times, there were times that I'll spend probably 2 months working with the clients, putting together their budget before I even touch their AWS environment. So your skills are not only limited to cloud, right? So the sooner you understand that, the sooner you're going to set yourself apart from a person who just went and wrote an exam and got the certificate, right? Because when you go into a company and they're interviewing you for a solutions architect role, it's in most cases, solutions architects is probably 90% pre-sales, where you get to have a lot of meetings with the companies, a lot of workshops to actually understand, probably what Mduduzi Inc. is running there, and understand what his budget is, understand where he wants to take his business in the future. And then you come back, you sit on the drawing board, and then you tailor make a solution for them. And that, for you to be able to do that effectively, you need to understand networking. You need to understand, cost implications. So being a solutions architect goes beyond just knowing which services to switch on, because for you to be able to get to switching on services, there's a lot more work that you need to do beforehand before you actually get to that specific point.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Arthur. We value you so much. And I think the guys in the audience can agree with me that we need another session with you. I would like to say thank you, everyone who joined. I've taken a picture for a screenshot for everyone who switched on their camera. Thank you. I've also taken just with our 31 participants there showing, so that they know we are a big team and we need a lot of stickers. We also like you, Cuba and team there, huddled together. Thank you so much. We love the energy and the enthusiasm. Guys, don't forget to register for the AWS Summit, which is happening in September. We are going to try get a booth there so that we can meet and greet each other. It would be nice, help us collaborate better. I'm also sending out a call for speakers. If you want to come present and talk about anything on this Thursday sessions, feel free to message me. There is no topic which can be regarded as not important. As you can see in our chat there, we get entry-level questions, high-level questions. So guys, feel free to come and polish up your public speaking skills with us. We are a good bunch of people. We are chilled, we are relaxed. As you can see, I'm in my onesie. So there's nothing to be shy about to come and talk to us.
Yes, I'm wearing my pajamas.
That. We couldn't tell it's a onesie.
It's a very nice one.
These are my pajamas, guys. This is my sleeping clothes. So
yeah. So guys, thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your evening. For those prepping for your exams like me, Study well for the rest of the night. Feel free to send messages in the chat. Please, I need someone with a good understanding of machine learning to help me. I'm going to send my message in the group. I also need help. So yeah, thank you, everyone. Enjoy your evening.
Thank you, everyone. Much appreciated.